Good morning, Trinidad and Tobago, and welcome once again to the Bourse Report. Last night, the Honorable Prime Minister on the national media announced and reconfirmed the closure of Petrotrin's refining and marketing operations. And among other things, he spoke to the issue of the credit rating of Trinidad and Tobago and how the Petrotrin debt can or will affect the ratings of the country. And today we take a look at Petrotrin's long-term bond debt and how this will or can affect the national ratings, as well as matters such as the country's ability to make repayment against these debts. Let's look at what are some of the debts of Petrotrin. In this, our first graph, what you will see is that Petrotrin has two major outstanding bond issues. This is exclusive of the short-term working capital facility of approximately $300 million that is now guaranteed by the government of Trinidad and Tobago. First off is the 2019 bond issue with a coupon rate of 9.75, and the outstanding debt or the bond issue is $850 million to mature in very short order in August 2019, less than 1 year away, with a maturity of 10 years. The second is what you call an amortizing bond, which was issued in May 2007 for 15 years, and this is maturing on May 2022. I am told that the issue was, which began at $750 million, with payments that have been made thus far on the principal. The outstanding debt on this bond is about $250 million. So in total, there is about $1.1 billion in debt being carried by Petrotrin. And these are unsecured, senior unsecured obligations of the company and are not guaranteed by the government of Trinidad and Tobago. Let's take a look at what has been happening to the credit rating of Petrotrin being backed by the government of Trinidad and Tobago. And you would see a time series here where the bond in 2009 was BBB, which is what you call investment grade. That is a high probability of repayment and good credit risk. And over time, in this time series, as I point out to you, what has been happening is the credit rating of Petrotrin has actually been falling. So the minimum investment grade by S&P is BBB-, that is ability to pay. And what this graph is showing actually is that the rating has fallen below investment grade to what is called speculative grade. And as it gets lower in the ABC system of rating, you will find that some may call it junk bonds. And so, as at the end of April, Standard & Poor's rated and continued to rate the bond BB, which is just below investment grade. And BB also on the basis that the expectation, when you look at the text from the rating agencies, that the government of Trinidad and Tobago would stand behind these bonds. What has been happening then? Let's take a look. Well, as noted by the Honorable Prime Minister, there has been significant losses in consecutive years in terms of Petrotrin's income. I'm showing here Petrotrin's income before tax, all below the profitability line. That is $1.9 billion in losses before tax, 2015, $1.8 billion, 2016, $1.7 billion, 2017, and for the 9 months for the financial year 2018, $243 million TT. So yes, the ability of the company to pay its debts comes into serious question because of the losses being generated. And I believe last night the Prime Minister spoke to the question of insolvency. I'll come back to this graph, but this is to show that for the 2019 maturity of $850 million due in August 2019, if you take a snapshot, this $850 million constitutes about 11% of the foreign exchange reserves of the country as stated as of July 2019. So it's a very significant bite, 11% of the overall pie of about $7.7 billion. If you were to take that out, it means that you would remain in this snapshot at about $6.9 billion. So what's next? When we look at what is happening, let's look at what has been happening with the Petrotrin bond issue. So you hear about credit ratings, which as the credit rating lowers, our cost of borrowing will go up as a nation. So when you look here at this particular, and we are looking at the 9.75, 850 million bond, which will have to be repaid or refinanced. That is, refinance mean you would need to borrow again to roll over that debt. So when you look at this, what you are seeing happen is in a time series going forward, Moody's, the other major rating agency, downgrading the Petrotrin. What has happened, the blue line tells you the price of the bond, and the red line tells you the yield, that is what yield you can earn on the bond. And as we go forward, we've talked about the adjustment in the credit ratings and the downgrades, and so this is very important, what has been happening over the last month or so. What we are seeing is at August 31st, a holiday in Trinidad and Tobago, but trading in the US and other markets, the price of the bond has come down to as low as 95.77 per $100. And the yield has gone up excessively to 14.65%. How does this figure in the overall scheme of things with other similar bonds? We'll talk about that in a moment. But this is very worrying and very troubling for any investor and in the bond. For any investor in the bond, they would have seen, if they bought here, they would have seen the price drop considerably. And the yields now were very speculative or junk levels. And we've talked about this, and we've seen in the time series what has been happening with regard to the yield. I'll go past this because we've already spoken about it, and let us look at where the bond is in terms of yield relative to other similar bonds that have the same credit rating of BB. Now remember, BB is a credit rating that has been given on the basis that the government will stand behind it on a standalone basis. As of today, Petrotrin is B-. Lots of issues to consider, and I'm looking at similarly placed bonds that are maturing around the same time next year with at the highest yield, 3.8 to 4%. Petrotrin 14.7%. So the question of credit rating is very important. The question for investors, international investors, will Petrotrin pay? And it's important that the government reinforce or reconfirm whether they will stand behind the bonds in this period of restructuring and planning accordingly. So these are some of the issues that we have to look at. I've looked at this already. And what I will say to you is it's a very important area. We can talk in a lot more detail, but time is very limited for me to present. Look for us on our website at Bourse Investment for further details about this Petrotrin issue. You can call us at 226-8773. This has been your Bourse Report.